Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I'll call into open session the meeting of the AISD Board of Trustees on April 16th at 7:07 p.m. I thank everyone for coming out to be with this evening. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join Ms. Pena in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Please be seated. If you would, please silence all cell phones, electronic devices to avoid disruptions. And now, if you would, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. At this time, we'll move into our first program presentation. The 2015-16 Financial Futures Committee report to the Board of Trustees. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And this evening, we'd like the committee spokesperson and committee chair to help us present the FFC report to the board. And we're going to start with Cindy Powell as an introduction. Cindy.
President Hogg, board members, Dr. Cavazos, good evening. Every year since the early 1990s, 1992 I believe it was, we have had a Financial Futures Committee. It used to be called the Citizens Budget Review Committee, and that committee has had as its purpose for those many years a charge to advise the board on matters pertaining to the upcoming budget. And over the years, this committee's been very important to us and has given us excellent feedback that has helped us develop the budget and understand the community's priorities. And it's something that, frankly, I think is somewhat unique. I don't know that there are a whole lot of districts that use this particular committee or a committee like this the way that we do, and I think it's something that is a real positive for our community. So with that, I usually start out before the committee spokesperson and chairman get up and make their presentation, just to once again kind of put a context, a frame around all of our work. This is a multi-year budget forecast, and we showed the committee this when they first began meeting in February. And so I'll share this with you. The column that is entitled Budget 2014-15 shows that we have a $20.8 million deficit as it appears. The only reason that there's a negative there is because we've chosen to take surplus funds out of our fund balance in constructing elementary school. And so we record that as an expenditure this year, and so it makes that bottom line appear negative. Without that construction cost, we would have had a $1 million surplus in the operating budget for this year. So as we've moved through the year, we now are making projections for the end of the year. And so the column that's orange, it looks kind of green on the screen here, shows that we are projecting to actually in this fiscal year with a much smaller deficit than we budgeted, $8.7 million. So we've had some favorable variances as we've gone through the year and expect those to continue. Then we make forecasts on out each of the next 4 years. And that honestly it's a real challenge each year because we have to make a lot of assumptions to make those forecasts. And the biggest one, or the biggest thing that we know will happen, is currently the legislature is meeting, and they will meet again in the spring of 2017. They very likely will have a special session next year to deal just with school finance. So they will meet at least twice before you get to the 2018-2019 year, probably 3 times. And so when we make our projections, all we can do is estimate revenues using our current current funding formulas. And so that's what these are based on. Beyond that, we try to be very conservative in our assumptions. The other thing we always point out is we never presume a raise in here, and so that's a significant expense. So what you see up here for forecasted expenditures does not presume that there will be any additional raises given. So what you see is that When we made these projections last in January, we were expecting that for the 2015-2016 year, assuming current law stays in effect for funding formulas, that we would end the year with we would have a budget with about a $6.5 million surplus. And then you can see that that trails off a little bit in the future years. Again, we try to be very conservative in these. You're going to see a presentation a little later in the meeting, legislative update that touches on the budget bills that are being considered right now. Both of them are very favorable to us, and so they both will change this picture in a positive way, but we have a long way to go still before the session ends and before a budget is actually adopted and possibly even a school finance bill passed. So this is kind of the frame within which the committee begins its work. We have with us this evening our chairperson, Tony Papa, and so I'm going to ask him in a few minutes to come up. He's asked me to go ahead and go through the purpose and the charge to the committee. Again, this committee has existed since 1992 to advise the board on the upcoming budget and to have that community engagement component within our budget development process. We have a list of folks here who participated on the committee. Some of them are here this evening, and I'd like to ask them to stand. They do a tremendous job every year. We have some returning folks and some newbies. And I say this every year, and it really is true. It's always amazing to me. I mean, we live this, and we do this all the time, every day, and it's a lot to digest. And it certainly changes all the time. So I'm always very impressed when we have individuals in the community who will volunteer their time to come and to sit and listen and study and learn, and then begin to put all the pieces together to help them make good informed decisions and recommendations to the board. So it's a lot to process in a fairly short amount of time. The Board Community Engagement Committee, Peter Barron, Dr. Aaron Reich, and Keisha Mays oversee this committee and attended the meetings and advised this committee and advised the chair, and so we very much appreciate their extra service in this area. There are a number of people from the staff that participate in this process. Over the years, this number has grown because this is much more than just a study of finance. With this committee, we have so much of what we do is built around our payroll, our compensation. 83% of our budget is in the payroll area, and so HR has a big hand in this, as well as academic services and operations. And so you see a list of folks here who have participated and sat with the committee in small groups and answering questions and providing information. And so this, I appreciate this, because this is definitely on top of a lot of things that these folks also have going on besides just working on next year's budget. So in terms of the charge, every year the board adopts a charge specific to the committee. This year the charge included gathering data, both internal and external data, about school finance and things affecting school finance, and accountability. And that's important to understand, the accountability system and how we fare in that, what our student performance is, to help make decisions about where we direct our resources. So that's always that front end piece of the FFC meetings. Also, this committee needs a very good understanding of our strategic plan, because everything we do is built around that strategic plan. And so they've heard information on our strategic plan, both our current strategic plan and the one that we'll be developing for the next 5 years. And then looking at our general operating budget, at the time that this committee starts to meet, we don't have a budget yet for them to look at for the upcoming year. So we show them the current year's budget and talk about the things that drive our budgets, that have big impacts on them. And we talk about the things that we know will be coming up in the next year that we need to take into consideration. So they have to digest that as well. This year, we've also, kind of specific to this group, asked that they receive data on certain specific things, reports from administration, and then determine and understand the impact that these areas have on the general operating budget. And that included academic services priorities. Dr. Wirtz made a a presentation one evening outlining the work that we have done with finance and academic services to identify the priorities for our work over the next few years and how that impacts our budget. Also, looking in terms of the human resource area, both how we staff, our current staffing formulas, and compensation. And compensation involves our salaries and wages, also our benefits, and so in our wellness plan. So there was information presented by Mr. Kale at a meeting on those areas, and then operating costs associated with the bond projects that will be coming online in this upcoming year. Then the committee was charged with formalizing recommendations around those things. So we've done work internally. We've identified what priorities we have for the upcoming years, not just single year, in terms of work. And so now then we've shared that with this committee and said, okay, what else is there? What else should we consider as we move down the road around those priorities? And so that's what you will see this evening are their recommendations. And then, of course, reporting out their recommendations. So that's the charge to the committee. We did have a requirement that nobody on the committee miss more than 2 meetings. If you had to miss more than 2 meetings, then you could not vote when it came time for the recommendations. We did not have anybody in that situation. The committee met 5 times. We were interrupted once due to weather. We had to cancel a meeting one night, first week in March, due to weather. But you can see here, the first night was all about us providing information, background information to help them with their work going forward. Second meeting was all about academic services, and Dr. Wirtz led that discussion. Then in March they had a meeting where we strictly broke into small groups and rotated through the different priority areas that academic services had identified and met with staff from the academic services area to address questions that committee had left with us following the first meeting, and to begin some discussion among those small groups about those different priority areas. And then on March 31st, Mr. Kale made his presentation on how we staff and on compensation. And again, they broke into small groups to discuss those areas. And then last week, we talked about operating cost associated with the bond program for the upcoming year. And then the committee had already submitted to us recommendations that they had out of those small groups. And so we were actually able to finish voting on those recommendations last week and discussing them. And so 5 meetings and now the report to this board. In total, there were 14 recommendations. A couple of them were very similar. The committee wound up withdrawing 4 or combining them for final consideration. So there were 10 votes that were, or 10 recommendations that were voted on. 7 received majority supporting votes, and you'll see all 10 of those this evening. But the budgetary impact of these recommendations that received majority support is potentially $2.9 million. And as you'll see as we go through the presentation, again, there's some assumptions made here when we come up with these cost estimates, and so these estimates may change as we move along. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Pompa, and then he will introduce the spokesperson for the committee.
President Hogg, distinguished members of the board, Superintendent Cavazos, hey, it's kind of nice to be back here.
Good evening, Mr. Pompa.
Feels a little different sitting on this side. But I want to start first of all by recognizing that I know how important transparency is to this board and to this administration, how important community involvement is, and recognizing that it's not always easy to do. And there's been times where this board, this committee has challenged us, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing for the citizens to get a deep look into our finances and make recommendations that sometimes we wouldn't think of as a board. And so I thank you for having the foresight, the willingness to accept that and to continue to authorize this committee year after year. I think as Ms. Powell mentioned, Not every district does it. As a matter of fact, there's probably very few that do it. And I think it tells us a great deal about the quality of the school board and the administration that we have in the school district. So again, thank you for allowing this committee to serve. Thank you for the honor of allowing me to chair this committee. I enjoyed it very much. I've been deeply involved with this committee now for many years, and so I enjoyed the opportunity to work with the committee again. Huge thanks to the administration. Ms. Powell, of course, made a mention of everyone and that they supported us, but the amount of time that they commit to this entire process, not only just attending all the meetings that she mentioned, but all the preparation, the documentation, the paperwork that they provide for us, and then just the openness and the willingness to accept our questions and give us unfiltered information that we request, and very, very quickly. There were not any requests or any questions that this staff was not able to provide to us very quickly. So again, to the staff that is here and the staff that is not here, acknowledge all the work that they commit to this effort. With that, I am going to introduce David Wilbanks. David has served on this committee for several years as well. He has presented before, and I thought since he had done that before and I hadn't, it'd probably be better if he did it. And I tend to sometimes go on a little too long, so I figured, we won't be here all night if he talks. So, David, thank you for your willingness to do it, to make the presentation. So come on up and go ahead.
Thank you, Tony. You don't know me very well if you think I'm going to be shorter than you. But I'll try to be brief. President Hogg, ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Trustees, and Dr. Cavazos, I'll go through our recommendations. As Cindy said, there were only 14 recommendations this year, so we focused on quality, not quantity. But as you see, I think these are very good recommendations, and I do want to build upon something that both Cindy and Tony touched on. And as a taxpayer, as a parent, as a member of this community, I so want to thank you guys for giving us an opportunity to have a voice in something so important as the budget and something that affects all the citizens of Arlington. So, and giving you guys the important feedback from the community as to the pulse of what the wishes of the community are. I wish it wasn't unique. I wish more districts were like this, so kudos to you in giving us this opportunity. So I don't want to rehash what they said, so let's jump in and talk about the meat of what we were able to produce. Out of the 14 recommendations, there were 7 that received a majority yes vote. The first one was presented by Ms. Ann Mason on our committee. And it started out as a recommendation to move to a block scheduling at the junior high level so that it was more in line with what students are expected when they go to high school and beyond when they go to college. Also for students who play sports at junior high level and they take a lot of advanced classes, there's a lot of homework, this would give them a breather and allow them to have better time management. And also the feeling is that teachers would have the opportunity to dive deeper in each class and have more substantive discussions in each subject, and it would be a less hectic pace. After talking with staff, we agreed as a group to modify this proposal to look at the study and look at the efficacy of moving to a block schedule and what its impact on the district would be. Just a rough estimate Cindy's group put out is that initially their thought would be another 63 full-time employees would be needed, and at a cost of $3.8 million. So after armed with that, we decided to modify the recommendation to look at the study and really look hard at student outcomes as well as the cost and see if there's a cost benefit there. The second proposal to receive a majority vote was number 6 in our list, which was looking at the competitiveness of our salaries. And we're looking at moving to kind of the range with a medium target for all salaries, not just for teachers, but for all employees. But when you look at that right now, there's a number of areas where we're not as competitive. And so the thought would be, if you look at those particular ranges where we're below market, if we should focus any pay raises on those that need more of a boost to be more competitive. And this proposal received a unanimous vote. We're all in favor of it. The tough part, we weren't very prescriptive. We'll leave the hard part up to you guys, is to figure out how you do that in an equitable fashion. So, but again, this passed unanimously. The next recommendation was also related to salaries, and we recommended that instead of focusing on health insurance and alleviating the cost of the health insurance or providing additional benefits, that it would be more equitable given the low participation rate in our current health insurance program. It would be more equitable if we focused that money on salaries instead of health benefits. And that also received a unanimous vote. The next recommendation was to look at, which kind of contradicts, but we felt that even that we should look at incentivizing a wellness program here that would be targeted at all employees and not just the select few that are on the health plan. Given a rough cost of to make an incentive meaningful, it's got to be more than $100, but certainly less than $1,000. So using a $500 as a benchmark, that would cost the district roughly $2 million. But we as a committee felt that that was a wise investment in terms of providing more productive employees, less absenteeism, and hopefully one day, cross your fingers, that we'll be able to come out of TRE and we'd be more, set ourselves up for more favorable rates if we were allowed to purchase insurance on the open market one day, hopefully. So the next one to receive a majority yes vote was to research and evaluate, to reward staff with performance-based pay. And we know this is a tough issue. We know it's a big mountain that's hard to move. Everyone's looking at doing it. Not a lot of districts have implemented it yet successfully, but we had a lot of discussions on what equity was and how to, but at the end of the day, we felt we still wanted to go forward with a recommendation to send a clear message to the board that we support your efforts around this issue. It wasn't unanimous, but a clear majority of our committee, which I think is reflected at the community at large, definitely supports this effort. The next one was related to staffing at our secondary level in terms of core classes. This one did, we had a large number of abstentions. This is something we all favor on paper, but when you look at those core classes, we want to affect those educational outcomes, and we know reducing class size has an impact. We use it, as you guys know, we use a staffing ratio, and sometimes even though you're targeting a certain number at per class, we go over that. When we actually looked at the data, I think where a lot of the abstentions came in is when you look at the actual data, the number of classes, there's not a, that distribution is definitely under, around that 27 to 30 range. Those that fall outside of that range, the curve drops off pretty quickly. Also, Dr. Wirtz provided data on research that yes, class size does affect student outcomes, but it's when you get that tipping point, which going from 30 to 27, you don't really see much impact. It's only when you go from, say, 30 to 15. So, but again, this one passed. There was a lot of discussion around it, and we wanted to move it, making it more of a cap, use the ratio, but look for those areas where we might have outliers and try to cap those in terms of core classes. There's also a lot of discussions on how you define core classes. Obviously the classes they were tested in, but does an advanced AP English class count as core, or does an advanced physics class count as a core science class? So there's a lot of, different opinions on that. So that's, it would be tough how you kind of define that. But that was the result: 7 yes, 2 no votes, and 7 abstentions. The final recommendation to receive a majority yes vote was in the area of security personnel at our high school campuses. Recently, Lamar, Sam Houston looked at their security needs, felt that they were understaffed, and after review, it was determined they needed a much larger staff of security personnel. And the focus of this was to kind of provide a more formal process to do a security audit or look at those campuses on a periodic basis and see where those personnel fall relative to their needs, and then make adjustments. In addition to that, the proposal, if you were to read the full wording of the proposal, also called for itinerant staff or a pool of security personnel to be managed at the central office, to be sent out where they were needed. I know at Lamar, for instance, they had only 6 security personnel on staff, and one day I believe 2 or 3, almost half their staff, called in sick, and it was a particular high need day, but they were way understaffed for that kind of day. And so I think having a pool of security personnel that we can deploy either at the high school or junior high level, or even if there was an incident at one of our elementary campuses, would be a wise choice. So that proposal passed with 13 yes and 3 abstentions. Okay. There were only 3 recommendations that received majority no votes. And the first one was related to GT services, gifted and talented services. There were actually a couple of more proposals that were either similar, or after talking to Dr. Wirtz and his staff, they were either withdrawn or combined with this first one. The first one was to screen every student who enters the district, either at the kindergarten level, when they come in at kindergarten, or if they transfer in or move into the district, provide screening at that time. After talking to Dr. Wirtz and the norms in terms of how you test and when you test for GT students, most of us felt that that was impractical. Also, the cost were also a concern there. Well, actually not on that one, but on the next one, which was related, which was to recommend 2 GT teachers at every elementary school. Obviously, it was cost prohibitive. Also, Dr. Wirtz made a great case that this is going to be a priority the next year, but the first step is to select the model. We can't talk about staffing until we define the model, which defines what's actually needed. And so we as a committee felt that we were definitely, for the first time, we were moving in the right direction, and that we were working on a real plan to address that issue, which has been a big issue in our community for a long time. So hats off to Dr. Wirtz's staff in terms of where they're moving on GT services. And that is it. There were 1, 2, 3, just 4 other ones that were withdrawn. And again, that was primarily because of explanation from staff where they overlapped with some of the other recommendations, or they contradicted some of the other recommendations that were passed by the committee. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. And first off, thank you to the entire committee. We know how much work, and Mr. Pompa, how much time you've put in over the years over this, and yourself also, Mr. Wilbanks. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, President Hogg. And on behalf of Dr. Reich and Ms. Mays and myself, thank you from the board subcommittee on community relations for doing a great job. Thank you to all the folks out in the crowd there. I do want to say something about performance pay for teachers. When I was there she is, Jessica Levy. When I was president of UEA, one of my last speeches to this board was an impassioned plea for the district not to approach performance pay in any regard. Now, again, the recommendation here is to take a look at it. And that's pretty much in line with our strategic plan, which was to pursue performance pay for teachers and for staff too. I am definitely not a fan of performance pay. I think it scares the heck out of teachers. They don't know what to expect. If we were going to go down this road, boy, we'd have to do a good selling job and study it and study it and study it and make sure we're doing it right, because we don't even have a good performance system for our teachers. PDOS is ridiculous, and we don't have anything to replace it yet, and we won't have anything next year. So anything that dealt with performance pay would have to be really well thought out, and I'm not for it just yet. If we go to Colorado, where Superintendent Miles introduced performance pay several years ago, it got a great fanfare, and then it died. Right? They had to drop it off because it was too expensive, and for other reasons it just didn't work. My place and our place on the committee overseeing financial futures was not so much to lead your committee anywhere. So the board subcommittee did not contribute much to you all. I mean, these are your recommendations coming out, and I appreciate it. So if there are other questions, Mr. Hogg?
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Brand. Ms. Solons.
Thank you, President Hogg. Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Thank you, Mr. Pompa, and the entire committee for bringing this report. It is a tremendous amount of work. Thank you, administration. I know it's a tremendous amount of work. It helps inform our decisions and work together as a community, and I think that's incredibly important. I assume this evening, President Hogg, that we are going to be taking this into our budget talks and then have more time to go through all of these recommendations, and I'm certain that we will probably have more questions as we move forward through the system. One recommendation that I'm just very thankful to see and hear, all of them, I think a lot of them are really good, but there is regarding security. You know, we're in the business of teaching and learning. We're a school district, but I've always said if there's one thing that's more important than teaching and learning, it's safety. So I'm very glad to see that the committee took a deep dive and looked into security and what we may look forward to in budget discussions. So I will, I assume since we're going to be visiting with this in detail in our budget talks, I don't have any further questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Solons. Dr. Resch.
Thank you, President Hogg. Thank you for the information, Mr. Wilbanks, and of course to the committee, Mr. Pompa, your leadership, and the committee for all the hours and the hard work. I had a question, a little bit of clarification on the number 8 about the incentivize the wellness program with cash. It was $500 isn't the assumption what you're looking at. Can you provide a little bit more detail about that? Where that dollar amount came from, and just a general, I guess, discussion on how that became a recommendation of the committee in general.
Well, we broke out one night. Mr. Call met with us and talked about some of the big issues that he was facing in terms of budgetary impact, and solicited input on several topics. And this was one topic that we know, given our constraints with our current health care plan, this was one area where we thought we could make a positive impact and also be more equitable and provide an incentive to all employees and not just the few that are on the plan. In terms of what works, I will defer to Mr. Call if he wants to add anything, but I believe, we looked at what's worked in the corporate world where he's come from and at other districts, and it's got to be meaningful in terms of an incentive. It's got to be more than $100, certainly less than $1,000, and so I think Cindy and her staff just used 500 as a nice round dollar, but it's just a straw man to put in there that we want to go lower, we can, you guys are the expert on that. We'll leave the hard job to you guys to determine, if it's 500, if it's 650, or if it's $300. So, Mr. Call, is that accurate?
I guess, and we don't have to get into the details of this evening, but I would be interested to know if there's, evidence-based research to justify, market research with other companies that do wellness plans. Is 500 good? Is it if it matches the similar employee makeup as what we have here? Is 300 good? Is 600 good? What is kind of the magic number to make this a robust incentivized plan and not just throwing money out the window? And I think Mr. Hogg, in your industry, you'll probably be able to guide us on this.
Dr. Reich, I see this every day with clients. I see what they're offering as I work in the HR consulting and outsourcing world. I think you're right. You got to look at that. The one thing you also will have to look at, and I'd ask Mr. Kale to get us this number as we come into budget season and get close to that, is we offered a basic incentive for premium payback, which is honestly the most popular portion that's offered in corporate world right now. I would ask what the enrollment percentage has been from that, because your enrollment percent has been fairly high. If you could assume 50% comes in, that's really high. 500 is probably a little high, but I think you're right you're on the right track. You have to do a comparison with other organizations. And the other thing Ms. Powell, I'd ask us also considers come into budget season by offering cash and instead of premium payback, what kind of tax difference does that make towards us? Because sometimes if you're offering a cash incentive, I'm by no means a tax expert at all. Don't want to be, don't want to act like I'm be, don't want to fake like I am. But I do know that does come into play with that. And also, Ms. Powell, I would also ask our HR consultants what that does from an Affordable Care Act standards as you come in. No means are we going to anywhere near get close to offering a Cadillac plan, but there are many new standards that are coming up for 2018 in the Affordable Care Act, Mr. Kale, that we know we'll have to follow. And if we do somehow find a way to get out of TRS active care, those are many things to put on there. And when we approved a wellness program, as a board, it's very clear you have to have at least a 5-year investment into a wellness program because you really don't see much investment until after 5 years. So, Dr. Reich, I think you're right on in your line of questioning. The 500 seems, where's that number? What's the reason for that? And I think we also have to track it with what our enrollment has been on that to see if we're getting the enrollment we need in that plan, going away from a premium payback, which actually does fairly well. And you could stagger where you have a premium payback if you're getting the health insurance, and that's a little more value. And then the ones who aren't in our plan, you have a smaller cash value that could be there. There's multiple ways to kind of configure a plan.
Very good. Appreciate that. The other question that I have is more in a general nature regarding, and I think that the security question or security recommendation is where this question came from, as far as meeting the unique needs of each campus. Did that come into play in other discussions for the committee as far as staffing numbers? Do certain schools that are in certain conditions need more staff outside of a formula-based system that's system-wide? Anything like that?
On the staffing ratio issue at the secondary level, we didn't really, if I recall correctly, we didn't really talk too much about, the unique needs of each campus, but just setting a cap as a whole, as a general policy for the district, and trying not to go over that, especially in the core classes, however you define core. So, but, in past years being on this committee, when various topics come up, there were plenty of times where we as a committee definitely wanted to look at the unique needs of each campus and not paint a broad stroke across the district. So the fact that we didn't this time, there just weren't too many recommendations or areas of discussion where that came up.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Mr. Wilbanks, let me ask one or two questions. I love the idea of block scheduling at junior high. And I know we're going to explore it more. Was there discussion of like a modified block? Because I especially know the junior high level, it's proven on foreign language. It's helpful to see that every single day. Math is helpful to see every single day. Science and some of the others are good to see every other day. And the junior high level, that's such a, how do I say it, a growing age for young children where they're figuring out they're not young children and they're not full-fledged adults just yet. Was there any discussion much of that, of a modified block or anything of that nature?
I'll defer to Ms. Mason. I don't think, we didn't talk at all about modified block, I don't believe. And I don't think we looked at any cost estimates on a modified block. But as a parent, I would tell you that sounds like a great compromise. Because I would want my kid in those math classes every day in 7th grade. But yeah, some of those other classes, right? It
So
would be
that
nice
you
to
would
have
say
that
the committee's
deep dive.
probably willing to say, they see the benefit of a block, but also a modified could also, just as we take that into
Absolutely,
consideration.
that would be a block on training wheels to
Yeah.
ease them in there.
Ease
That's
them
like-
from elementary to the high school
That would
block
be a
level.
great idea.
And I think block comes in, and I commend our board. 3 years ago, we made the big financial decision to stay with block scheduling. Most other districts in tight financial times have abandoned block scheduling because it is much more expensive for a district to handle block scheduling. But I think there are many benefits. It allows our students to take more classes. It allows our students to have that involvement and enrollment, and also I think prepare them more for post-life a little bit out of high school. So I appreciate the committee's recommendation on that. Mr. Mayor, and I agree with you, performance pay has to be studied. I think you hear the word and everyone goes into sheer terror, which I would fully agree. As we've discussed many times, pay is a very personal thing that occurs. So anytime you talk about pay, I don't think that's one we need to rush into by any means. I think it's worth studying and looking into, because you think of things of what could be a performance pay. It could be as far as a campus sets their goals and their goals are approved, and so the campus achieves those goals that year, and it could have nothing to do with standardized testing. I would not be opposed to not having one piece of standardized test and show that we can do the things. How do we track a K through 12 on graduation rate, just a progress, so that certain schools are awarded? I think there's lots of creative ways, and it's going to take everyone having the discussions. And guess what? If we get to the end and we realize it's not the right thing, it won't be the first time we say, glad we looked into that, we've realized that's not the right decision. So I think we have to be, and I would ask our staff, there's no rush on this. We need to really have a deep dive, make sure it is, and I would even recommend having a campus or two beta test it for a year or so and see how it goes to build out and go into that growth, because I do think performance pay can be very beneficial if it's built correctly. If it's built incorrectly, it can be a very punitive system as a whole. Mr. Pompa.
And just to comment that we recognize that, and especially with some feedback from Mr. Kale in terms of really our inability to assess performance, period. And so to tie any type of pay to a system that you really don't have would be definitely premature. So the first step, obviously, and I know that this board is already looking at that, is how do we really assess the performance of our staff, not just the teachers, but everyone across the district. And so that's probably the first step that you take, get to the point where you feel like, okay, we really are able to assess performance. And then so it's steps, and we recognize that, and Mr. Kale gave us great feedback and in terms of what's been done to lay the foundation to be able to support that kind of exploratory move on that. So again, we recognize that, and so that's why we said just begin to explore that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Pompa. And on the last piece, I think as we move into budget season, on staffing of full-time security, I think that also needs to be, do we need to somehow work in our contract for more SROs, if that's ever needed, for an expansion of SRO? I think that includes that. I think that also, in this day and age of technology, I think we do a really good job with cameras and alerts, but I think sometimes if we can use somewhat, nothing replaces people as a whole. We all know in the world of police work, but security has gotten much better because of technology in some of those pieces. So I think if that is another item of where we increase that. But as Ms. Sullivan says, guess what? Nothing else matters. If teachers and students don't feel safe in the schools, everything else we work on, everything else we do up here doesn't work. So it is a critical factor. I thank you all for that. Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Hogg. There was one question that I forgot to ask. Regarding the upper limit of 27 students, was there any look or consideration taken into account for the facility space and requirements that might have an impact on?
On that one, I'm going to defer to, let me look at my notes. You have Mr. Reich, do you have a number by that proposal?
That was number 13.
13. Yeah, I have no notes in terms of, yes, 15 FTEs and about a $859,000 impact on the budget.
Right. But as far as classroom space,
We
don't necessarily
Well, that was
need
the
it.
other thing that I don't think, staff looked at, but that would cause issues in terms of finding additional classrooms. So anytime that that was something that came up on block scheduling at the junior high, there's definitely a facilities impact.
Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely something that we'd have to have included in our conversation for the budget, and see Ms. Powell going, yep, I'm on it. So thank you for that.
We left the
Appreciate
hard
it.
things up to the staff to figure out. We're
They-
just making recommendations here.
They can handle it, though, that's okay.
We get to have all the fun.
This is the perfect prep for
Thank you.
budget season. Ms. Pena.
I too agree about security. That's probably one of the most important things we need to do. And while we do have the cameras in place, I've noted too that we, in all areas, in all probability, we need to put more staff there. But I did want to address the pay for performance issue. I'm not a proponent of it only because I've been part of it, and I've repeatedly said when I worked for the Army, I certainly benefited from it. I had a significant cost or pay increases because of it. But I, as a person who worked with finances, I also saw what it did to the budget, and it is not an affordable direction. So measurement is an issue for me, and how we can afford it, and even in our budget. After 2 years, the Army took it down, and the Army doesn't do anything that fast. And so when you find out that a system isn't working and you take it down that quickly, it's something as a red flag that things don't work. And if we are ever to perfect something, I am certainly interested in that. But at this point in time, I do not see that as something that we should move in the direction of. We have not perfected it. We are not even close. And if we do address it, it will probably be years out. So I know everybody talks about it, but having been, like I said, I greatly benefited from it. So I can see for the employee, even though it is a hard thing, and Mr. Barron is right, when you talk about something that is that personal, unless an individual understands it, exactly how it's going to affect them, it becomes only about me and not anybody else. Rightly so, because it's your pay. And so it becomes very personal. So if we can't address it down to the minute detail, we should not put anything like that in place. And that's my view on the whole thing.
I think it's probably important to point out that most of us on the committee obviously work in the private sector. And, I think it's also important to point out that there was very strong interest from those that come from the private sector in encouraging and supporting the board to consider it, to look at it, and to see if there's a way that, it works for, multi-billion-dollar organizations all over the world. Is there a way that we can make it work within within the school district? And so that's why we left it in there. We left it open enough because we know how difficult it is, obviously.
And that's the big part. It is very difficult, and there are a lot of details that would have to be worked out. Because I have seen it in the outskirts of the educational arena, but I know it didn't work for the Army.
Thank you, Ms. Pena. Gentlemen, thank you so much to your whole committee. Thank you for that. These will be, as Mr. Pomp started years ago, constantly discussed so we can keep continuing to review them to see how they're enacted upon, because we value the time of the committee, everyone that's worked on this, and our staff. We don't put everyone through all this just to have a document that we're looking at. So we are going to review this during budget season, and after budget season, we'll come back and see what we've implemented and how we've done as a whole. So,
We
and I thank
appreciate
Mr. Pompa for his guidance and leadership on that years ago to start that. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to, we don't have a public hearing, and next we will move to open forum for agenda items. This is a routine part of the board's meeting, regularly scheduled meetings. A segment of the meeting provides citizens with the opportunity to share their views with trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It's not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to the speakers. Derogatory comments aimed at individuals will not be tolerated. Personnel matters are provided. I have one card from our evening, Mr. Jeff Harris to speak. Jeff, you know the rules. You have 5 minutes. Lighted timer will assist you. When the yellow light comes on, there's 1 minute left, and then when red comes on, let's start to sum it up. And Jeff tonight is speaking on behalf of UEA on FFC recommendations. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening. Thank you, President Hogg, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. Jeffrey Harris, and I'm with UEA Arlington. And I want to comment about financial future recommendations of studying merit pay systems, since I served on that committee as UEA's representative. First, I want to thank Mr. Barron and Ms. Pena for both their comments tonight. Your leadership on this issue is greatly appreciated. Many of our neighbors have tried pay for performance plans, and they have failed at producing an equitable system. We have surveyed our members using the polling company, I'm going to get this wrong, Belays, I cannot pronounce it, and Associates out of Austin, which I believe is what you use. We found that over 85% of our members are against any type of pay for performance system. Our teachers work very hard every day in our schools, doing whatever is needed to achieve greatness. Again, we want to thank Mr. Barron and Ms. Pena tonight for their words. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, we'll move on to discussion action item. The first discussion action item, the only discussion action item we have this evening is consider a resolution regarding high-stakes assessment. Ms. Solons.
Thank you, President Hogg. And as we begin this, I want to take a moment to thank Peter Barron and Aaron Reich and Leslie Johnston for the work that we have done, the work they've done this week as we have worked and looked at this very important topic of high-stakes testing. In our day in public education, high-stakes testing is an enormous concern to our parents, to our teachers, to our students, to the entire system. And it's imperative that testing be used for the purpose of helping students, helping teachers, informing instruction, diagnosing needs so that we can serve our students to ensure that they graduate on time and reach their maximum potential. The current state system is high stakes, high stress, and clearly damaging. Parents, we hear you. Teachers, we hear you. Students, we hear you. And as a group, bring forth a resolution regarding high-stakes testing this evening.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Solons, and what a great summary and intro to that. As we read this, Mr. Barron, would you please start us off reading this resolution so everyone knows what this resolution will be?
Thank you, President Hogg. A resolution regarding high-stakes assessments. Whereas effective, efficient, and equitable academic accountability systems are necessary to carry out the mission and the objectives of the Texas public education system, and whereas Texas's current high-stakes accountability system is too complex for school districts to drive continuous improvement for districts and campuses, and whereas the state accountability system should focus on campus and district improvement results of core content areas rather than on the test results of individual students, and
whereas assessments should provide standard measures while allowing local superintendents and school boards to control how to respond to those measures, And whereas student assessments are admittedly moderate predicators of later success, they should not be the sole driver of the teaching and learning process at any grade or content area, and should not cause undue stress to students and families or teachers' dissatisfaction and burnout.
And whereas college and career-ready education requires but does not depend exclusively on student testing and assessment, and whereas educators recognize the need for and desire accountability by the local Board of Trustees,
Whereas the responsibility of analyzing, rating, and responding to standard measures through an accountability system is the responsibility of the local Board of Trustees rather than the responsibility of the state, such as providing ratings of an A through F. Whereas such local accountability systems provide much stronger incentives for the local Board of Trustees to improve its district and campuses than the state accountability system does.
And whereas the Arlington Independent School District adopted its Achieve Today, Excel Tomorrow strategic plan in 2012 and adopted a comprehensive local accountability system with only 2 of the 28 measures related to high-stakes STAR testing. And whereas the AISD's comprehensive local accountability system includes items such as participation and success in rigorous courses, percent of graduating seniors taking and performing well on a college-bound assessment, percent of students on track to graduate on time, college enrollment and success, extracurricular and co-curricular participation, facilities, customer service, and effectiveness of leadership development.
Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Trustees of the Arlington Independent School District does hereby urge the 84th Texas Legislature to end high-stakes assessment and to empower local school boards to create and implement local accountability systems using standard measures of student success. At this time, I'd be more than willing to accept a motion.
I move that we accept the resolution regarding high-stakes assessment as presented.
I second that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion by Ms. Pena and a second by Dr. Reich. Before we take that vote, Mr. Hibbs is having to lead a symposium in Houston tonight, so he did read me a statement, so I'd love to read a statement from Mr. Hibbs. President Hogg and distinguished board members, I'm sorry that I couldn't be in attendance tonight due to a symposium that I'm presenting to in Houston. I do want to share how proud that I am of my fellow trustees and continue to stand up for our teachers, parents, and most importantly, our students. The AISD has been at the forefront of seeking legislative reform in the area of high-stakes testing. Tonight's resolution, once again, has the AISD speaking in support of our 65,000 students. It is our hope and desire that those making the policy in Austin will leave educational instruction to educators, not legislators. I am in full support of this resolution. At this time, we have a motion by Ms. Pena and a second by Dr. Reich. Please vote. 6 trustees present, 6 trustees voting in the affirmative. Mr. Hibbs supporting through message. Dr. Reich, at this time, you do have the resolution. Would you please sign it and pass it over as we sum this up? I think this is important to note. This was brought and formed from one of our citizens that had the idea, and we saw our colleagues and Katie doing it, and we appreciate it. Anytime colleagues in the state have good ideas, we love it. We think it's a good idea, and we come about from that, and we'll take that. The one, to also sum it up, I think it's important to note, we've been fighting testing for a while. If you look at our legislative agendas, you'll see even in the 83rd legislative session, the work we did to get House Bill 5 passed. House HB 5 decreased testing. It didn't eliminate, we know, but it had a major decrease in what that fight was. And if you look at our 84th legislative agenda that we published a couple months ago, it very clearly states the fight against high-stakes assessment testing. And so I commend my colleagues for taking the step on this resolution. This is something where the state gets to determine whether we do this or not. And there's many consequences if it's not followed by the state of where it is. But I think it's very clearly and important to make a stance and say we don't agree with what this testing's doing and what's happening in the testing. I think it's very clear to point out and saying we have systems and measures to judge progress, because that's what we have to do as an organization, is how's our organization progressing. Thank you, Mr. Barron. And with that, we have a resolution passed. I thank all my colleagues, I thank all the staff for this support on this resolution. This will be, Ms. Johnson will publish this on our website and send it out with a letter, a summary letter showing, kind of giving a little summary, because we all know not everyone wants to read every whereas. Whereases get tired, but I understand, but that's an official resolution. Thank you to my colleagues for doing that. Up next, we will move to items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there any items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda this evening? Thank you, guys. Sorry, Ms. Powell, you're probably waiting on me, weren't you? I was saying bye to people instead of working on the consent agenda. Seeing how none of my colleagues responded when I asked the question if there's any items to be withdrawn, I would guess there aren't any consent agenda items to be withdrawn. Ms. Powell, would you please brief us this evening?
Sure. We have 3 bids on the agenda for your consideration this evening, and in all cases, the administration recommends the lowest bids and the bids that represent the best value to the district.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move to accept.
Second?
I have a motion by Dr. Reich and a second by Ms. Pena to accept the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hold on a second, don't vote, let me clear. Okay, seeing none, please vote. All trustees present, all trustees voting in the affirmative. We have approved a consent agenda. Thank you. Up next, we have 2014 bond program discussion. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And this evening, as part of our bond update, we want to give the board an update on our STEM labs. The STEM labs are part of the bond that will be in every elementary school. And so tonight, Dr. Wirtz will give a presentation regarding the instructional programming, because I think it's important that we continue to emphasize that with the STEM labs, we have to have an instructional response to that and not just a facility response. And so tonight, Dr. Wirtz will present that instructional response and our expectations. Dr. Wirtz.
President Hogg, school board members, Dr. Cavazos, I'm happy to be here tonight to share with you some information about the upcoming STEM labs that are being constructed as part of the bond package. I invited Mr. Earnhardt to do the presentation for me, but I'm kind of on my own tonight, so I'm not sure it's going to be quite as entertaining. But I think that the information inside...
That's high expectations, Dr.
Right,
Wirtz. You better be careful walking on that. Our Director of Fine Arts is the best presenter in this district.
Right,
so,
for sure. So, but I am here to talk to you about the STEM labs. And we had, to start off to let you know the background, we had a committee of 25 members that consisted of principals, teachers, members from the finance department, technology department, to help us to design labs that can go into each of the 54 elementary schools that we're constructing that would have a STEM focus and allow kids to be engaged in innovative instruction that would allow them to apply their learning in authentic ways and that have real-world context. So in our strategic plan, we've committed to providing a high-performing technology-rich, being a high-performing technology-rich school district with leading-edge learning experiences that promote engagement, creativity, critical thinking, and achievement. And I chose to highlight this section of our strategic plan tonight because I feel like this really gets to the essence of what the STEM labs are designed to actually do. Provide kids an engaging learning environment where they're challenged to think critically and to think thoughtfully around real-world problems and have that experience enhance not only their academic achievement but their preparation as they prepare to leave us and move on to their careers or post-secondary schools of choice. I wanted to provide you with a brief timeline of the 3 phases that are in the bond and when these labs would actually be constructed in each of the schools. Next year at Diane Patrick Elementary and at Adams Elementary, we have 2 schools that will have the STEM labs ready and operational to begin at the beginning of the school year. And then by the first phase will be completed at the end of in June of 2016, where we will have 4 more schools that will be ready. And then you'll notice that it's kind of cyclical. So the second phase of the bond would be, these labs would be completed in January, February, and March of 2017. So we would be adding several more schools. And then the final phase would be phase 3, which finishes in February and March of 2018 for a total of 54 campuses. So it's a gradual process as we move across the district. And as I get into the details of the professional learning and the implications at the schools, we will be rolling that out as the phases of construction happen. And we're doing that intentionally so that the teachers not only have the opportunity to learn the practice, but then they can immediately put it into practice rather than learning about something years and years in advance without the opportunity to apply it. So why STEM? When we initially thought about this, we thought science labs. But science labs is not really getting down to what we were describing in the strategic plan of an innovative learning experience. STEM is focused around science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and it's constructed around the idea of a multi-interdisciplinary approach to instruction. It's the idea of removing the barriers that people naturally perceive as existing between the content areas and allowing students to take the skills that they learn from those content areas and apply them in a real-world context. The learning that takes place in STEM is generally hands-on, and it also gives kids an opportunity to apply their learning in a way that promotes problem solving and critical thinking. And the last thing it does is it works to actually close the gap between what takes place in the schoolhouse and what happens in the workforce outside of school by giving students real application to their learning around the community and the larger global context. Here's some things that we know from research. STEM occupations are projected to actually grow by 17% between the years 2008 and 2018, which is about which is compared to the 9.8% increase in non-STEM areas. So this is an area that's significant in our community. And also, in 2010, the median annual wage for STEM occupations was approximately $73,290, which is almost double the median wage for the average worker. And also, STEM education is tightly linked to the country's economic prosperity and its actual place within the global market. And so as we thought about the opportunities we were providing our students and transforming their learning at the elementary level, we really are trying to design learning that will prepare them and give them opportunities to have this kind of impact as they move forward past their secondary years. This is a simple graphic. Well, it's not really simple when you look at all the words. Yeah,
simple.
Not
graphic.
really. The graphic is simple, but there's a lot of words in there, and I know you all have copies of this so you can see it more closely. But the reason I wanted to include this is because it shares with you a more visual about how these areas, these content areas, actually have common places. STEM is really around science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And although we don't necessarily throw English language arts in there, it's implied because when you are engaging in any of those content areas, there is elements of reading and writing and thinking. And so in the center of all these three areas that we're talking about, it is talking about building a strong base around knowledge, which is connected to English language arts, reading and writing, constructing arguments and critiquing other people's reasoning, engaging students around arguments that are established in evidence-based learning, and this is all founded around the concepts of STEM. And so I just wanted to show you a graphic that kind of highlighted some of those things. When the committee of 25 members gathered, they were charged with several goals. And the first goal was to begin the process of identifying a philosophy and vision for STEM at the elementary level, and also the use of the STEM labs at each of the campuses. We also asked them to begin the process of developing standards and expectations for the lab use, because we didn't want to have this incredible space and then have it either sit vacant or be used just as another space to do typical lab experimentation. We also wanted to articulate and support specific standards for the integration of technology into the learning that the students would be participating in, not only curricular-wise, but also with regards to their suggestions around the types of devices that the lab should have. And then to identify curricular and professional learning implications and the possible impact and benefits that those would have on students' education. And this is a simple graphic that actually kind of outlines the process that they went through. We gathered a multidisciplinary and a multi-level design team that took time to first review some of the literature around STEM. What is STEM? What are the goals of STEM? And then to begin the process of identifying what the vision and mission around STEM would be. Start thinking about what the program should actually look like in the STEM environment at the elementary level, and then work with finance and the facilities department to begin to design what the space should look like in order to accommodate the kind of program we want students to be engaged in. The committee recommended the beginning, these are drafts, of the idea of the vision and mission statement at the elementary level, and their recommendation are these two things. The vision would be to provide a STEM-focused environment that ignites passion for learning while empowering future graduates with tools to compete globally. And our mission is to provide opportunities for students to explore, discover, and engage in the learning process as problem solvers in an innovative and collaborative environment. Our target in elementary is to create a STEM pipeline. We have a STEM Academy, as we know, that is opening at Martin High School, which is just one component of the STEM education opportunities that our students can be engaged in. And we wanted to begin that process much younger when they're in elementary schools. And so the target of the STEM labs is to provide a platform for that to begin, and begin developing a pipeline for students to be prepared as they matriculate into those upper grades and have more opportunities to engage in STEM learning. We wanted to begin the process of unifying ourselves across the district about what we believe and understand the pedagogy to look like when we're in the STEM environment, and what kind of philosophy should we have when we are trying to be supported and support our corporate partners and business community members. So the labs are designed, as I said, to have a STEM focus, and we are trying to do this around these areas. Transform the teaching and learning that's actually taking place in the labs, provide professional learning for our staff so they can engage students in the new type of learning, and also provide teachers with job-embedded coaching and support for implementation. Begin to deliver cross-disciplinary lessons, design lessons specifically around the idea that students, we can take standards that they're learning in math and in science and in English language arts and other content areas, and embed them into learning units where they're actually taking those standards and applying them in real-world contexts. Branding the labs as STEM labs rather than typically science labs, calling them STEM labs to articulate the intent behind the labs as something more than an isolated area around science. Staffing the labs with meaningful staff so that the teachers can focus on the teaching while we can keep the preparation of the labs moving, and then designing the labs so the proper equipment and the layout of the labs are conducive to learning. This is an outline of what the state requires as far as investigative type of learning that takes place at the elementary level in the area of science. So students that are in kinder through first grade are expected to have at least 80% of their science instruction fostered around that type of learning. Second and third grade, 60%. Fourth and fifth grade, 50%, and sixth grade, 40%. And the learning as they matriculate obviously becomes more complex and more complex, so science becomes more than just lab type of experiences as they get older, which is why we see the reduction as kids move along. But I wanted to highlight this because it really sets the tone for why STEM labs are very appropriate. It's not just about books when it comes to science or STEM or mathematics. It's about providing kids with hands-on experiences to apply their learning, and this meets some of the requirements that the state has around their learning in these areas. Also, we wanted to provide some expectations around the STEM lab use, and so our goal is to provide some focus around integrating STEM content areas, and then also having opportunities for the campus teachers to utilize the STEM labs appropriately to support learning that's around math and science. Most elementary schools, you wouldn't think about going to a lab to do mathematics, and we believe that's a very appropriate use of a STEM lab to engage in learning using equipment that would help students master math concepts. We also received some recommendations from the committee regarding standards and expectations for curriculum and instruction, and the first one is around the implementation of STEM curriculum, where we can seamlessly integrate content areas to make this a learning opportunity available for students. Also, to deliver this content through STEM processes. STEM has a very inquiry-based, hands-on, problem-solving type of process that's used to teach content, and so we want to include that as opportunities when we're providing professional learning and when we're designing the type of experiences in our curriculum documents for students. Also provide a space where students can collaborate with one another in their learning, and then also have opportunities to present their learning seamlessly with a variety of presentation output methods, including oral, written, visual, and other methods. And then finally give students an opportunity to apply their thinking around real-world problems. I was speaking to a staff member earlier today. I had recently watched a video about a student who's, and we're going to talk about an piece of equipment tonight that's recommended, which is a 3D printer, and how the student was actually able, through a STEM process, and actually through the inspiration, well, his father actually is the one that did it. He had a need to have a prosthetic on his hand, and they were able to use like a 3D printer that you can normally find in a STEM lab to design a prosthetic for his hand to allow him to grip for $10. And so that was just an interesting example of the kinds of things kids could actually be engaged in an elementary school, using some of the STEM learning opportunities and the equipment. When it comes to STEM opportunities, it's really not just about the mathematics or the engineering or the science courses. STEM is really about the process that kids are engaged in their learning. This is an interesting quote by a researcher in the area of STEM that said, "Without adopting inquiry-based, student-centered, skill-driven approaches to teaching and learning, all nested in a system that values innovation, STEM education will become just another term for additional math and engineering courses." So it's not just about having more math and engineering, it's about creating a learning experience where kids can actually be inquisitive and come up with real solutions to problems. So our goal when it comes to the curriculum instructional practices around the STEM lab are exactly that. We're trying to design it to foster curiosity, allow kids to think about things from a problem-solving standpoint that's inquiry-based, give kids opportunities to really take ownership around their learning, to collaborate with their peer groups like they would outside of the school environment, really have opportunities to engage in open-ended mathematics and science concepts to really try and solve real-world problems, and then give them an opportunity to possibly construct prototypes to these problems utilizing the technology resources that we'll place in the labs. This is an example of a really easy cycle that gives you a brief idea of what a STEM model would look like in the classroom, where kids analyze a problem, they really utilize some self-directed learning that's inquiry-based to try to identify what they need to know in order to solve the problem, brainstorm ideas, and then develop prototypes and test their solutions and see if they can make it better. This kind of thinking is really at the foundation of STEM learning. So as we think about the labs, we are, as Dr. Cavazos indicated, supporting it with a curriculum and instructional response, and so we will be doing that over a multi-year phase-in. Our goal is to integrate standards across the STEM areas and increase access at all levels at the elementary schools. And in phase 1, we'll begin in grades 5 and 6 designing STEM lessons, and then we'll move into phases 2 and 3, where we'll begin adding grades 3 and 4, while we continue to build upon the 5 and 6, and then we'll add K and 2, while we begin building upon 3 and 4 until all of our students have an opportunity to be engaged in this kind of learning. The other point that we wanted to share with you tonight were the expectations around technology integration. This is a key point inside the STEM lab, and the committee was charged with not only identifying what the expectations for technology integration would be, but then what kind of equipment should we recommend to have in the labs. We want students to be engaged around the use of a variety of tools that they could use in many unconventional ways as they think about their learning. And when we think about technology integration, the tools themselves should actually be an invisible part of the learning. It shouldn't be about the tool. It's more about the tool being used to facilitate the learning. We want to provide an environment with technology that allows students to collaborate with each other and business partners regardless of their physical distance or time zones around the world. We believe that if we use technology properly, we could have students engaging with their peer groups on other parts of the world and even receiving advice or interaction with mentors from the industry in other time zones, because we have that luxury now in the 21st century. We've also want to provide our students an opportunity to utilize technology to actually construct their learning in ways that may actually be impossible without the use of technology, and to give kids an opportunity to engage in activities that have meaning outside of school, and allow them to be self-directed. And we know that our students love technology, and we believe that by empowering them to use it in meaningful ways in the STEM environment, that they'll take more ownership for their learning. This is some of the recommendations that came forth from the committee regarding the device and equipment. We have up here several items, I won't read all of them, but all the way from projectors to 3D printers to iPads and Chromebooks and probes and things like that. So there's lots of opportunities for kids to be engaged in a variety of technology. This does not necessarily represent our limitation around technology. This isn't necessarily the only thing that we will see in labs. It's an idea of what some of the recommendations came forth as our starting points of things to consider as we think about those labs. And finally, I wanted to share with you briefly about some of the professional learning. We know that if we design labs and even provide curriculum, but we don't really give teachers an opportunity to interface with that new learning, that will limit our students' access. So we will be designing opportunities for teachers to engage in professional learning that really helps to integrate standards not only vertically but horizontally and vertically across content areas, and give them an opportunity to share practices with one another and collaborate with each other to deepen their understanding around the concept of STEM. We will begin designing core learning sessions around this whole idea of cross-disciplinary learning, how to design a STEM lesson, how to engage students, actively engage them in the inquiry-based kind of model, and then provide that kind of learning not only in a workshop type setting, but also with coaching through job-embedded professional development, and then also provide training to our principals and leadership at school so they can also mentor and encourage this type of learning at their individual buildings. We also have the goal to really have a community outreach, have STEM family nights where we can bring our experts in from the community and to participate in STEM activities with our students, and to maximize the expertise of many of our parents that live in the community that are engaged in this type of work. We believe that there's a lot of positive instructional benefits to having this type of learning available to our students at the elementary grades. It increases rigor. It provides opportunity and a platform for students to learn in creative ways where they are at the higher levels of critical thinking, of evaluating and analyzing things and data. We also believe it provides relevant learning where kids are engaged in learning that has real world context, and so it doesn't take learning in the school environment and isolate it as just something they learn but they don't really understand how it applies. STEM actually really helps them see the connection between what they're learning, how it actually impacts their life. And then the mastery of the standards themselves, which we know are given to us by the state of Texas. But we also want to support students who desire to grow in the STEM area and pursue possibly a STEM endorsement as they leave our elementary years and pursue their academic careers in the secondary high school range. So this is the work of the STEM Lab, Elementary STEM Lab Committee. I would like to give a special kudos to Danielle Reynolds. She is our district science and health coordinator. She led this process and led the team, really helped to design their thinking as far as what things to consider, and brought forward a very solid recommendation. So I'd like to thank her and her team for their effort and hard work.
Thank you, Dr. Wirtz. Oh, what the bond leads to.
Right.
couple of rooms leads to lots of pieces. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, President Hogg. Thank you, Dr. Wirtz, too. You slowed it down a little bit tonight. That was pretty good.
I'm trying to.
A lot of the listeners really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think I really like the controlled implementation across the district. Do we have the same contractor for all of the STEM labs, same construction folks, or is it spread out?
No, what we have, we will have 2 STEM labs in our new elementary schools, and so we have different contractors for those 2. We have a package of a construction package of 14 schools that will get their STEM labs all from that same contractor. But what we have done here is taken input from this committee, and we are giving the specs, if you will, to the architects, and then they in turn will design it for the contractors so that we have a standard available to us. We're looking at something roughly 1,100 square feet, the storage, the cabinet work, the casework, the water in each facility, and the furnishings. Even in the bid that you all approved earlier this evening for flexible furnishings, some of that is for the STEM labs. And so that will be very standard across all the schools because we are developing that spec, that design we give to them, but there will be different architects and different contractors.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Wertz? I guess I really appreciate the fact that you've thought ahead that we're going to need to train the teachers as needed. It's almost like a just-in-time assembly line, that the teachers will get the training as their labs come on board. That's great. Could you go back to the Venn diagram for me? Not that I have a question on it, I just want to try it.
It's easy.
I just want to try out my pointer here and see if it actually works. Okay, so if this was a star question, all those circles would have numbers in them, and all those little wedgies would have numbers in them. And the question for the students would be, how many kids took math but didn't take science, or how many kids took math and science and didn't take ELA? Saying that, oh, it does work. Look at that. So there. Thank you.
No problem.
That was my toy. Okay. I also appreciate that we're going to require, and I think it's a good thing, collaboration, teacher to teacher, to share these things. That's great. Produces teamwork among the teachers, and it spreads the pain a little bit. And it's going to be collaboration among the students, and this is a job skill that they need. It's really going to work great. On the teacher end, actually on the student end, it sounds like project-based learning.
It's very much like
it's going to look like that in the lab.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. As you know, project-based learning is a very specific type model. It's definitely inquiry-based, which is very supportive of a project-based type learning. But yes, where they are really about designing outcomes to real-world problems. So there are definitely some similarities.
I really like that part. And I think when we get to the kids at a really young age, K1, 2, 3, then we're going to retain girls in science and math that typically we would lose right away in 3rd or 4th grade when they start doing whatever girls do. And the boys separate out and just do math and science. This is going to keep the girls in the technological fields, and that's great. And the big thing I wrote for myself is that this thing is going to answer the question that all the kids have all the time, which is, when am I ever going to use this?
Yes.
Right? If they're doing it in their hands in the lab, they'll know when they're going to use it, and that's
Yes,
huge.
that's true.
I love it. Thank you.
No problem.
My mom can answer that question. You don't have to worry about that. You're learning.
Actually, I would just say it's on the test.
Yeah. Tell me she'll answer it for you. So, Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Hogg. Just to dovetail on the last comments made, these kids are going to have different needs and expectations when they get into our junior highs after this, because this is a new standard, and so that's to come. Our junior highs are going to have to be looked at as far as the facilities, capabilities, and what the teachers are currently doing versus what they will be doing in the future. So one thing, and I think this is all great, if you could go back to the very first slide. No, the very first.
That one?
No, the very.
This is the first
That.
one. This one?
That
Oh,
one.
okay.
So what is that image, Dr. Wertz? This is a STEM presentation.
I
so
understand
figured-
that. I'm not a doctor, but I don't know. It looks creative. I don't
know either. It looks like it's a Gram stain slide for a microscope.
No, when I created the presentation, I took it from the recommendation, so I thought it looked really nice, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
It looked really nice. Okay.
It's an artistic design.
So we get pretty colors, no STEM on this.
It's an artistic design
All right.
from Mr. Earnhardt.
Yep.
I know, right? I should have made it up.
Okay.
There you go. It's so close under a microscope, we can't really tell you exactly what it is.
It does look like a photon microscope Gram stain slide of bacteria to me. But anyway.
Dr. Wertz,
Okay.
I think that is what it looks like when you experience learning. That's what it looks like.
There you go. Those are all that's all that's going on in the brain.
All right, enough of the political
Yes.
answers. Dr. Reich. go
Okay.
ahead.
I do think, as part of the implementation and rollout, I have a suggestion.
Okay.
And this isn't just for you, this is for the district as a whole, regarding education, communications to our community, to our parents, and to the students, around specifically what STEM is. Because right now, most people associate it with a buzzword in education. Most people associate it, well, I won't say most, but I've had several come up to me and say, this STEM thing is a fad, just like open concept design years ago. It's just a fad. It's not going anywhere. And I try to explain to them, well, actually, it's a lot deeper than that. This is what it is. It's just an acronym. So I recommend some type of a communication education campaign to consider with this, and along those lines include industry examples. It was very good of you to provide the $72,000, $73,000 median income from a STEM-related job, maybe some examples so that people can have some tangible understanding of what it is to be a STEM-abled individual in the workplace when they get out of our system. So that's one thing that could be of value. I do have a question regarding the budget that we put together for the science labs in the bond package. Seeing we have morphed into STEM labs, are we going to be on that target still? We're not going over. We're going to get more bang for our buck, essentially.
We are. We're very comfortable with that. We
Good.
budgeted $18 million for the 2 STEM labs and the acoustically appropriate strings room that will add to existing elementaries, and then certainly with new construction, we have funds in there to take care of those spaces in the new schools, and even in the renovation work, like for the academies. And so we're very comfortable with that. A lot of this, as much as anything, is the furnishings that are unique, that and maybe look a little differently than what we first anticipated when we built that budget. We're still very comfortable with it, and most of this is about the way that learning is delivered. And I have to applaud the group. I was at the very first meeting of this committee, and it was really interesting and inspiring to see the way we moved very quickly from what Mr. Hogg described as 2 rooms all of a sudden to STEM. And so the way we've grown and enhanced already what we plan to do with this, and the value is going to be significantly greater than I think what any of us had originally envisioned.
Absolutely. And well, stay there, because one of my questions probably results with you coming to the podium. It was, again, on budget items. I think we budgeted, or approximated $3.2 million of recurring expense added on with the bond implementation, with what is likely redesigned professional development or added professional development for this type of teaching. Does that number change? Or are we
the
still going to be
estimate of the 3.2 was the estimated cost for operating the new facilities that come online. There was not anything specific to STEM labs within that $3.2 million. I think what Dr. Wirtz will tell you is that we budget for professional development every year, and we have a particular curricular focus, and this just is more of that focus will be
Good.
on this now, and so it's not all new dollars, but going forward, we'll certainly look at what the staffing needs are. There may be something unique that we don't have today that we determine will benefit our program down the road, and so that's not yet in any $3.2 million, any operating costs related to the bond program.
Okay, very good. I do have another consideration. I think you can rest. Thank you. Regarding these STEM labs, it takes considerable time away from the teacher in setting up a lab, and I've had discussions with a few folks in the community. One, and I have to give her the credit for this, Barbara Adams, at her namesake school, and she said, with the amount of time it's going to take the teachers to set these things up, they're not going to have as much bang for the buck getting in there, and then they have to break it down. couldn't we have clerks? Couldn't we have some kind of aides, somebody in there dedicated to doing the setup and the tear down, and have a schedule set, almost a weekly schedule. And so my conversation with her, I said, well, I think that would be good. We'd have to look at a budgetary impact, but we could also look at partnerships with UTA, with their students for volunteers, or some other mechanism in the community. So I throw that out as a suggestion to implement, because I want to maximize the potential for this. I know our teachers want to maximize
Absolutely.
the potential for this and not be necessarily stuck doing something that somebody else, even on a volunteer basis, could do.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I will say we are actually discussing that because we recognize that that is a limitation. We want to maximize the use of the labs and not have instructional time reduced because of what you're
Right.
describing. And so we're working through solutions around that right now.
Good. That's excellent. I'm happy to hear what those will be. I think, again, out of this bond comes so many opportunities, and there's yet another one where we can engage our community and bring them in and affect our staff at the same time in a positive manner, ultimately affecting our students in a positive manner. One last thing, you spoke about the state STEM requirements.
Yes.
And
The science requirement.
science, okay.
This is, you're referring to the minutes, the percent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so that is, and that's a good clarification. So that is science expectations, not
Yes.
STEM?
No, there aren't,
Okay,
it's not
because I
STEM.
didn't think that we had a
No.
STEM state thing.
No,
Okay.
what I'm suggesting here is that the STEM lab also helps to promote actually meeting their expectation
Right.
around, this is for, the percentage of time is based on investigations and outdoor learning. So students in kindergarten through first grade, 80% of their time in science and their learning should be either in an investigation or outdoor type environment.
Gotcha.
And so the STEM lab helps to support us meeting that expectation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Good. That was a clarification I needed. It's wonderful. Very excited about this. This is going to be transformative. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Ms. Pena.
Thank you, and thanks for the, it was entertaining, by the way.
Oh, it was? Okay,
Yes,
great.
it was. I wanted to kind of follow up on something that Dr. Reich said about getting volunteers to help with the setup. Another area that could probably be used is we have these students that are in the high school who are interested in STEM, and they could learn what to do in STEM by helping our elementary students. So we could even use resources from within the school district to help the school district. And so I think that's a great idea, and then utilize our own sources. The other thing I wanted to point out was that according to the timeline, this is going to start out at Adams Elementary and at Diane Patrick Elementary. Both of them in the year 2015 to 2016 school
This
year.
fall.
And they're both schools in the east side. So, the east side of Arlington is going to have a quick benefit of what's coming with the STEM in the elementary schools, and I think that's great. The other thing I wanted to point out that you had in your presentation was the STEM Family Nights. I think that is fantastic, because we are doing everything as a school district to bring families within the schools so that they can learn what their students are doing, and this is an awesome opportunity to be able to do that. This kind of goes along the lines of our parent university, bringing
Yeah.
parents in to provide the parents with information of what their students are doing. So I think this is a great item to have here. It might also allow for families who are not even yet into the elementary school, the pre-K, to see what is going on at a particular school as far as the STEM program. So I really like this as an avenue that we're taking in order to introduce this into our population.
Okay, thank you.
Good thought, Ms. Pena. We're already making my 9-month-old learn the periodic table. Go ahead. I'm kidding. She can't even talk yet. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And I'd just like to kind of take a moment to remind all of us, because we get into all these discussions and different presentations, schematic designs and things like that. This particular part of the bond, and there are many components, but this one affects the elementary level. And I think it's really important. We've been talking about multipurpose activity centers, the Career Tech Center, et cetera, and projects to come that are secondary based.
Good point.
This project affects all elementary schools, thousands of elementary students and elementary teachers in a very positive way, a very transformative way. And it's kind of a part of that bold vision of affecting our entire system and being purposeful about it. So when we have a STEM lab or STEM labs opportunities at the elementary level, that we have that instructional response, we collaborate with our teachers, we train, we have a good rollout plan, but that it's very intentional and that these are not random kind of improvements. They are all focused on a K-12 system of improvement. This is a huge piece for the elementary level, and I thought just kind of reflect on that tonight.
Very well stated. The better they do in elementary, the better they'll do in our junior high and high school STEM. Dr. Wirtz, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Mr. Earnhardt has the sizzle, but you've got some awesome content there, so we appreciate it.
No
And you
problem.
did a good job tonight.
Thank
I
you.
said Earnhardt has sizzle. He has sizzle in his presentation. I think that's a fair way to describe it. Up next, we'll go into our discussed legislative update, as we do always during legislative session. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg, and tonight we'll have a brief legislative update from Cindy Powell, who has information about some bills and some impact on us and some discussion.
We do, and so I'm not sure where this leaves me, but I can tell that I've got a different presentation pulled up here at the moment, so we'll wait just a second. All right. President Hogg, board members, Dr. Cavazos.
Ms. Powell, Mr. Earnhardt wouldn't start like that.
You know, I know, I know.
I'm totally kidding, Ms. Powell.
But it's true. All right, we do want to give a legislative update, and this is important. It may not be quite as exciting, but it's very important. We know that with our legislative agenda adopted by the board, we have three overriding objectives, and that is local control and preserving the provisions of House Bill 5 that was adopted in the last session, and relief from unfunded mandates. And then within our legislative agenda, there are four broad categories of items that we recommend and suggest to the legislature. As of last Friday, there have been a total of almost 6,200 bills introduced, 212 passed by the Senate, and 57 passed by the House. So you can see that they're not moving very fast. So just to highlight several bills of particular interest that fall within the scope of our legislative agenda. We've had some conversation this evening about a resolution on high-stakes assessment. There's a bill that has passed the House, HB 2804, by Dr. Aycock, the chairman of the House Public Ed Committee. And it has two kind of distinct components. It has some information in there, some requirements relating to assessments, and then also for accountability. And so what's interesting about this is it moves from a system of 4 domains to 5, and there is a mixture in there of some local ability to select the particular instruments that are used in these assessments. You can select them from a list approved by the commissioner. And so that's this particular piece is for the assessments is the districts actually select either assessments, possibly even a rubric for project or portfolio-based assessments and or norm referenced assessments in the areas of science, social studies, and writing from a list that's approved by the commissioner. And then the district would be required to adopt policies requiring students to be assessed at certain grade levels, both in science and writing, and then also using a rubric for social studies at least once in certain grades. For accountability, as I just mentioned, what this particular bill as substituted recommends is 5 domains for an accountability system. As it was originally filed, there were 4 domains. And so as it worked its way through the committee and was substituted, there would be 5 domains provided. And they still have not set the weights for sure. The discussion has been that these could be possible weights assigned to these different domains, and each district you would receive a rating on each domain and then also an overall rating. And both districts and campuses would receive ratings. So there's a lot of work still to be done on that, but it's interesting, and it's an attempt to address high-stakes testing. Some of the points that I have heard have been around the fact that if you use rubrics, and you have a lot of local choice in here among what you select for your assessments. That really has to be for local accountability systems. If you begin to compare across districts, then that becomes rather difficult, and there has to be a very defined structure around how you evaluate and how you implement the rubrics and make those assessments even internally. So there's a lot to be done there. In terms of the appropriations bill, these are the budget bills, and the House passes a budget each session, the Senate passes a budget each session, and then ultimately every session they wind up with a conference committee to come together and negotiate terms for a singular budget. At the moment, if you look at just the public education piece of the budgets, the Senate version of the budget, their budget, has more money in it for public education than the House version does. However, what actually comes to the school districts, the vast majority of school districts, we will get more, recognize more direct revenue through the House version than we will the Senate version, and I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. So the House passed its budget, passed it over to the Senate. The Senate immediately, when it went to committee, they substituted their version of the budget in place of the House version, and so now then the full Senate has passed it out, so now both chambers have passed their budgets. What will happen now is the Senate's version will go back to the House for consideration. They won't accept it, and then that's when we wind up with the conference committee. And so they will work until very late into the session to negotiate and compromise on the terms in the two different versions of the budgets. Looking very briefly at the two different versions, the House version actually puts more new money into public education that would flow through the formulas and come directly to school districts. Plus, outside of this bill, outside of the budget, there's another bill pending on school finance. If that bill passes, there's another $800 million that would be added to the $2.2 billion, so there'd be a total of $3 billion of new money added into public education under the House version. The House does seek to grant some tax relief. The two chambers are going at this a little differently. They both want to offer tax relief. The House version would cut sales tax, actually cut the state sales tax rate a bit, and also cut business taxes by pretty much, I think it's a straight 25% across the board. Whereas with the Senate version, they go at this a little bit differently. They likewise want to offer tax relief, but they are looking at property taxes as a vehicle to give that relief. And so under their budget, they would propose actually increasing the homestead exemption and then using some of these surplus dollars that are available this year for the budget to make up for what school districts are losing by having to raise their homestead exemption. And that is why there's a difference in the two budgets between what we actually will recognize. The Senate version has more money in the budget, but they will target more of that towards tax relief, basically just making up the revenue we'd be losing if they vote to increase the homestead exemption. And so there's less true new dollars that flow to school districts in their version of the budget. But they do, even aside from the tax relief dollars that they've dedicated, they also add new money into the public ed budget, almost $1.2 billion. As I mentioned, aside from the budget bills, there's also a school finance bill. And what we all have to keep in mind with the budget bills, that's where money is appropriated and put into the system. When you talk about a school finance bill, it's usually about how that money is distributed. And so that's the case here. Dr. Aycock, who's the chairman of the House Public Ed Committee, has written a bill. It's House Bill 1759. That bill has been substituted as it was in committee. And as I mentioned a minute ago, that if this bill passes, there's another $800 million that is sitting in Article 11 of the House version of the budget, so that would become available also for public ed. But this particular bill makes some very dramatic changes to the state funding formulas. The first thing it would do is increase the basic allotment, so every district would benefit from that, just increasing that basic allotment. And so you can see that increase is over $800 there, from $5,040 up to $5,888. The way some of that money comes into play here is partly there's more money available for the legislature to appropriate, but then the House version of this bill would eliminate the cost of education index that's used today in the funding formulas, along with the transportation allotment and the high school allotment, and take all of those dollars and instead direct those dollars into that basic allotment. It would also propose to expand career tech weighted funding down to the 8th grade level. It doesn't make any changes in the special program weights, and that is one concern that a number of organizations and districts have expressed, especially in the areas of state comp ed and bilingual ESL, where there are greater needs, and there are a number of organizations asking that the legislature look at the funding weights assigned to those particular programs. This bill was actually heard this week in the House Public Ed Committee, and it's still in committee. There's no timeline given yet for the next steps on this bill. This is one where the education community as a whole is very supportive of this bill. And as we all know, the school finance lawsuit is still pending in the courts. And so there's some thought that, that there are some legislators that think that nothing should be done until the Supreme Court rules. So it's still a stretch to see if this bill passes. What I have heard repeatedly, though, is that even if this bill doesn't pass, this bill is going a very long way towards educating the current legislative body and setting things up for that possible special session that may be coming next year after the Supreme Court rules on the school finance lawsuit. What you see here is these are estimates of the impact of both versions of the budgets. The House version does take into account, assumes that extra $800 million is available in that model. So as you can see, the House version of the budget benefits us more significantly than the Senate version does. I will say and point out to everybody here, this looks great, and we would be thrilled to have additional dollars. We are a long, long way, though, from the session ending and knowing what, if any of this, will actually come to pass. And so it likely will not look anything like this when we're finished. But the estimates today show that we would benefit significantly over current law. So these numbers represent the difference between what we would get in each of the next 2 fiscal years, the difference or the additional dollars we would get compared to what we would get if the current law stayed in effect. Pre-K is one of the areas in our legislative agenda, and we've talked about this bill once before. House Bill 4 actually has passed the House and now has moved to the Senate for consideration. Under this particular bill, school districts would continue to be funded for pre-K through the funding formulas for a half day, and this would still operate very much like a grant. These dollars are still separate and apart from the funding formulas, but additional dollars would be made available to school districts to enhance their pre-K programs. Full-day pre-K is not mandated by this. It could be an enhancement or expansion in your program. So that is one that we are still watching and very supportive of. Those are just several key bills, several major bills that align very closely with our legislative agenda. And so with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Ms. Pena.
Mine is more of some statements. I don't really have any questions. And that's because last night I attended the North Texas Association of School Boards meeting. And Jim Crow, who is the executive director of the Texas Association of School Boards, gave a similar presentation on the legislative status to the Area 10 and 11 school board trustees. And he also gave the TASB version of what the directors will be supporting, and I happen to be on the legislative committee for TASB. One of the things that TASB is going to support is the funding area, bringing more funding towards school, with a cautionary note. It is feared that the pending lawsuit that you referred to, the school finance lawsuit, that the judge will use this as a dismissal because more funding has come to the school districts, and because the lawsuit is asking for additional funding, that this can be used as a means to dismiss that lawsuit. So what the TASB Legislative Committee has recommended, that when we say we support it, that it contain a caveat. And that caveat will say that this does provide additional funding, but it is not adequate funding, so that the judge can have something that will show him, yes, we're grateful, but this isn't going to do the job. And so I wanted to make sure that the rest of the board is aware of that TASB will be supporting that legislation with that caveat. And I think that I'd like to encourage our board as well to do the same.
Good point, Ms. Pena. Dr. Rush.
I guess I would say that as a board, our focus with these dollars that are maybe going to come into play with regard to the lawsuit is that it's not equitable still. We're still going to be out of balance. I really appreciate Chairman Aycock, and he's really trying to come up with something. I don't know if it really addresses equity at the end game. So still a long way to go, just like you said. One question of process, the pre-K bill will go to the Senate for maybe the committee to hear it, the Education Committee. Do they have to hear it, or can it just sit there and it's their prerogative to hear it or not?
I believe that it's their prerogative to hear it or not. I
Okay.
don't think they have to hear it.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see if that goes anywhere, seeing the Senate is much more conservative, if it'll get out of committee or not. And if it does, I would expect it to lay pretty much dead on the Senate floor.
And I think that, honestly, that's what I hear, is that there's not a lot of support for it in the Senate.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's all, and thank you for the update, and it's going to get moving real fast, real soon.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, President Hogg. That pre-K bill, it sure looks like something that we wrote in our legislative agenda, much like what Chairman Aycock's bills look like what we wrote too. Perhaps we should call down there and talk to our senator.
We could, yes.
Have you tried?
Yes, I have tried.
How'd that work out for you?
Not very well.
Thank you.
Mr. Barron, luckily, the money we spend on legislative consultants probably help. I don't think our senator wrote that, but as we start planning more trips down from the district, as Ms. Powell, they didn't want to talk. They don't want to talk to legislative consultants that we hire. I look forward to going down, and I look forward to tracking my mileage that the district pays, tracking meal costs, tracking parking costs, and I look forward to sending those invoices to our senator's office to let her know you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to talk to people on the phone, you only want to have people come to your office, and that costs the taxpayers money the whole time. So I look forward to tracking every single expense, and luckily I can do that in my phone with Mileage Bug, which I use every day for work. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to sending Connie Burden's office a invoice for my time coming down there in the next week or so. Ms. Powell, thank you so much. We look forward to these legislative updates and having this discussion during this lovely, fun legislative season. Thank you, Ms. Powell. Up next, we have open forum for non-agenda items. This is the second open forum segment of the meeting. Provides citizens with an opportunity to address the trustees on any subject except personnel. This is not intended to be a discussion or debate, and trustees will not reply to the speakers. Derogatory comments at an individual will not be tolerated. I have one card this evening. When your name is called, please step to the podium. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. A lighted timer on the podium will assist you in pacing your presentation. A yellow light will illuminate where there is 1 minute left for you to complete your presentation. When the red light comes on and the buzzer sounds, please end your presentation. The card this evening is from Mr. Luis Castillo with a subject written that I'm not going to read because I think it's inappropriate for you to write that on there. But Ms. Castillo, you can read it. Good evening.
Good evening, President Hogg and distinguished board members, Dr. Cavazos. My name is Luis Castillo. I'm the president of Arlington Alumni Council 4353. And in light of the subject title, and in light that you and I are alumni Arlington leadership, I'll extend you the courtesy of your concern, and I'll refrain from
That's okay. Thank you.
saying the title. And I altered my presentation a little bit.
Thank you.
Now, if you felt disturbed by just reading the subject title, can you imagine for a minute how parents feel when they're mistreated by staff, and then nothing's being done about it? You know, you read it and you felt disturbed, concerned. Well, how do you think parents feel when staff mistreats them? And I'll give you an example in a minute. Now, I really regret being here. It's been a while since I've been here, I guess if you noticed, but I guess somebody wants me to come back here. Now, there's no need for me to come back and address these issues to the board, really, because in the management model, these issues should be handled by administration. They shouldn't be coming up here to the governing board. These issues should be handled at the administration level, and you shouldn't be hearing this in a public forum. But obviously, they're not being handled, and that's why I'm here today. On several occasions, you know, it's been emphasized that communication is very important, and I've communicated to the administration, and failure to respond is not my way of communicating. I believe in two-way communication, and if they're not responding, I'll appear here. So, and having said that, about 2 weeks ago, board member Ms. Stallings and John Hips and Dr. Casas attended a community meeting in Arlington. And make a long story short, they made a presentation on the tech center coming up and the dual language centers that were coming up. And then some of the parents expressed some concerns, some complaints, which obviously the staff and board members were not prepared for. You know. But anyways, one parent who doesn't speak English got up and said that for 3 years she's been trying to set up a meeting with her speech therapist teacher. She has a student, 8-year-old daughter, who is speech impaired, and a little elementary school, and she's been trying for 3 years, ongoing effort, numerous times trying to meet with the teacher one-to-one to talk about progress of her daughter. And the teacher has flatly refused to meet with her for 3 years. You know, that's unconscionable. I mean, I don't think there's any conceivable reason for any teacher to refuse to meet with a parent for whatever reason. At least give them the courtesy to meet with them. So anyways, this complaint came to light. I communicated, I met with the parent, and I communicated the concerns to the administration. And the parent felt, you know, and I agree with the parent that her mistreatment is due an apology from the teacher and the principal. Because no one should be treated that way. To request a meeting and you just being refused, and all the frustration that you went through. And I hope that this would have been handled at the administration level, but obviously it didn't, so that's why I'm here. At some point in time, speaking on that line, you know, you as a governing body have to ask yourself, why do I want administration if these issues that should be handled at that level be coming up here in the public forum? You know, because we're all managers at some point in time. We're managers in other organizations. And that's why you got managers, to manage the issue. If they're not being managed, why are they coming up here? Maybe we need to change managers. Well, anyways, the lady, the parent, is very disturbed. She wants an apology, at least. Now, since that time, 2 weeks ago, the teacher has met with her and the principal. And the parent reported to me that the teacher looked disturbed because she was, I think, forced to meet with her. But the thing is that she feels that moving forward, it's being addressed. But the past experience, an apology is owed. And I think that I made that request, and I haven't heard nothing from the administration. But anyways, I can't help thinking that, what if it had been a white parent? Would I be here? Would you have heard such a complaint from a white parent? I don't think so. So that's why I'm saying that if you just read a few words and you feel disturbed, well, how do you think parents feel when they're being mistreated? And I want you to think about it, because it's a two-way street, you know. You just can't tell people this and that and don't expect a reaction. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Up next is Superintendent Report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg, and we'd like to share some information about our school district. Last week, we had a wonderful event celebrating 76 Teacher of the Year, one teacher from every campus. It was such a high honor for these teachers to be chosen Teacher of the Year by their colleagues, and they represented our district. They represented all the teachers in our district exceptionally well. So congratulations one more time to our Teachers of the Year. Sam Houston High School students keep improving, and after 5 TCU scholarships, community scholarships in 2013 and 6 last year, this year they have 7 students who earned the Community Scholars Scholarship, each one worth $250,000 to attend TCU, a full ride. Congratulations to Sam Houston High School students. You see them all there, and they are very happy. I'm sure they're still very happy, and their families are happy.
That's $1.75 million, correct?
That's
Dr.
correct,
Cavazos?
just right there in that picture. So outstanding Sam Houston High School students, and great job, all the staff
That
at
is
Sam
awesome.
Houston. Saturday was a busy day for AISD. Starting in the morning was the 2nd annual Earth Day Fun Run at River Legacy, our Plant Services Department. Got to commend them. They put this 1-mile fun run and a 5K run to benefit AISD Energy Management Program Activity Fund. And they had a great turnout and are looking to hosting the race next year. Saturday afternoon was the Entrepreneurship Day Award Ceremony, where students from 3rd through 8th grade submitted their What's Your Big Idea contest, and all the results were obviously very impressive. The winners were exceptional. Congratulations. This is just a small sample of the top winners, but many, many students were participated and were recognized at that event. Last night we had a great celebration, a pep rally for Sam Houston High School boys soccer team that has advanced to the UIL State Soccer Tournament for the first time in the school's history. The team left to Georgetown today and will play Katy Cinco Ranch in a state semifinal game at 5 p.m. tomorrow in Georgetown. I'd like to re-emphasize what we emphasized last night, which is that the entire community is behind Sam Houston High School soccer team, and they're already champions, and we commend their efforts. Finally, I want to congratulate our own President Bowie Hogg on being named the Arlington High School Alumni Association Distinguished Colt Alumni for 2015. This is a great honor. You can applaud, yeah. This is a great honor. Each year awarded to only a very few select alumni. Previous Distinguished Colt alumni include Tom Vandergriff, Tilly Bergen, Dean Corey, Mayfield Workman, many others, yeah. And
Don't
so
compare me with those people. Jeez, goodness gracious.
And now add to the list Bowie
Oh,
Hogg.
man.
This is quite an honor, and we congratulate Bowie for being a distinguished alumni. Others that were named were Randy Ford, Ross Minger, Jennifer Hilton, Sampson. And so, Bowie, congratulations for being distinguished alumni. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. It's very nice, and thank you to recognize that. Up next is school board reports. Ms. Pena.
I said I got one, but I got a bunch. Out and about, checking out what's going on. Attended the AISD Teacher of the Year banquet at the PDC. It was wonderful to see all those teachers that were being recognized for their outstanding contributions to the students of our school district. There were 2 in particular that I recognized. One of them was my daughter's 5th grade teacher at Little Elementary. She's an awesome teacher. Sorry to hear she's going to retire soon, but it's at that time now. And the second one was the wife of the deputy commander of the Corps of Engineers where I worked. I have fond stories to tell about her, which I won't share now. And then I attended the Arlington Women's Club Boots and Bling event. It's a fundraiser for scholarship funds to award to our high school students. And I attended the Arlington Entrepreneur Day from the Champion Education Committee of Chamber of Commerce. Leslie Johnson, our esteemed public relations lady, was there and did a whole lot of work to make that happen, and I appreciate it because it went very smoothly with all the children filling up College Park. And Six Flags providing their characters in suit to help the children learn how to come down from the audience to the stage. Then I attended, of course I mentioned the TASB upcoming legislative teleconference in which we had all those discussions that I shared with you all tonight, and also had a teleconference with the AISD budget committee here. I attended the Champion Education meetings. I'm actually a Rotary representative, but I can't help but pipe in when it has something to do with the school district. I also attended the Sam Houston High School pep rally last night, and it was wonderful to see the community come together in support of our students, and those young men were just wonderful, and even wanting to share how they got there with thanking their coaches and others that were involved in getting them to the level that they've achieved. And then, of course, I attended the North Texas Association of School Board meeting last night. And I want to remind everyone that tomorrow night is the AISD Education Foundation event at Six Flags, and they do tremendous things for our school district, for our teachers, and I would like to encourage everyone to attend that can. And that's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Pena. Ms. Mays.
Thank you. Just piggyback, tomorrow night, yes, the AISD Education Foundation at Six Flags. If you're not headed down for the soccer game and you're staying in town, please come and join the Education Foundation at Six Flags. I was able to attend the World Affairs Council Teacher of the Year 2015 luncheon today, and I want to say a congratulations to Julian Warner and Rhonda Pugh of Martin High School for being named Teacher of the Year for 2015, and I think they said this is the first time that they've done two, so just very proud. Shouts out to those teachers.
Where Malcolm Gladwell was the speaker today.
That's true.
It's not someone local. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell is the premier, one of the premier business change speakers. So
right.
Wonderful event.
Great. So yeah, congratulations. Just another very positive that's coming out of Arlington ISD, and another show of our wonderful teachers that we have here in the district, and very, very proud of them. And really happy to see them supported by their students that also were able to attend along with Principal Marlene. So great event. Also had an opportunity to attend Teacher of the Year banquet and congratulate and actually shake the hands of, I guess it was probably 74 out of the 76. I think 2 were absent. That just happened to be from my schools. But very glad to be able to shake the hands and say for Teachers of the Year, congratulations once again for all of their hard work. Had opportunity to attend the pep rally send-off for Sam Houston's boys soccer team. One thing I would like to say that was very noticeable to me was that the whole team, I never saw like one person that said, yeah, I'm the person on the team that's doing this. I saw such humbleness on we're doing this as a team, inclusive of the coaches. That was very impressive to me, and I really think that's key, is a camaraderie and synergy between a group. So congratulations to them. Very excited about what's about to happen. Because I was attending other events, I missed the junior high district track and field competition that we just had. So since I wasn't there, I just want to be able to say a shout out to a young man named Malcolm Mays who did get second place in the discus throw. So sorry I missed you, but congratulations, sweetheart.
Sweetheart. I hope they're related now.
That would be my youngest son. And then on a very honest, serious note, I would like to send out public condolences once again to the family of Mr. Glasgow, who I knew as our English teacher at Bowie High School, along with Miss Barbara Tapp, who I knew as our interim principal at Farrell Elementary. So being able to know both of them personally, I do want to send out condolences to the family and what a loss to AISD, but the things that they have done and impacted for our students is huge. So I just want to personally say that I think they made a huge difference, and wish their families full support. That's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, President Hogg. I guess being on some of these board subcommittees, the Government Committee and the Community Relations Committee, means I get to attend a lot of meetings, starting with the CBOC. Participated in the Young Men for Arlington Forum. Dr. Reich and I went and visited Peter Dow and briefed him on the Career and Tech Center that's going to be right across the street from his office. Went to the Teacher of the Year banquet at the PDC. We had a Financial Futures Committee, and then we had another Financial Futures Committee, and then we had the presentation tonight. The Boots and Bling at the Arlington, for the Arlington Women's Club was pretty doggone good. The food was great. Spring Creek Barbecue. Entrepreneurship Day at UTA for all the kiddos with their projects. Yeah, the three of us were on the radio show called The Commish. We did a live radio show with Mr. Ed Gray talking about the district, really. Problems with the district, things are solutions. Great show. NAACP had a forum at UTA. Visited with the United Educators Association the other day. Pepper Elliott Sam. Yesterday was a big day. Went to the viewing for Barbara Tapp at Wade Funeral Home, and then ended the evening with a visit to the NTAASB in Crowley, and today at the WAC. That was something else. This is the national award for our two teachers who took the world conference and brought it to the high school and created a high school program, which is now the model for the state of Texas. Very, very impressive. Great time. And that's it. Thank you.
Just have a quick shout out this evening to the Destination Imagination teams at Butler Elementary. I hear a couple of their teams, maybe three, went to have advanced to the global competition. Outstanding work. Congratulations, Butler Broncos.
And Ms. Owens, I think we're trying to recognize them May 7th, correct? At that board meeting?
Sounds like a great idea.
I think it's an idea you came up with. So, Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Hogg. I'm not going to go into line-by-line itemization. Was that most of those things that everybody's talked about? Great stuff. I wanted to say thank you, Ms. Mays, for bringing up the condolences. We did lose two very impactful people in our district, and some of us on this board know of one or two of them personally, depending on which one of us you talk to. It's always sad to lose really good people, amazing contributors. So I just want to publicly say my prayers go out to those families personally, and those students and everybody that lives have been impacted by them. They leave an amazing legacy behind. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And related to the World Affairs Council that Mr. Barron was talking about, our two amazing teachers that started that junior program, and yes, Ms. Mays as well, they're up to between 40 and 50 programs now with just their one starting. So that is an amazing legacy. And Julie Warner, she it was mentioned that she'll be retiring after 41 years at the end of this year, and everybody kind of chuckled in the room about that, oh, it's kind of about time. You've done a whole lot of work. 41 years, that's a long time. But I wanted to share with you that one of her passions, she said, I'm not retiring, I'm retiring full-time from the district, but I'm not going anywhere. And I'm planning on doing this world affairs thing and making sure that every single one of our high schools in this district has a club and has it going. And I said, let me know what you think you need. Let me know what you think our teachers need as far as help, and we will support that 100%. So tremendous fire and passion and changing lives and impacting lives. It's pretty cool. That's all I have.
Dr. Reich, volunteer labor is unbelievable what they can do as they retire. Dr. Reich, you mentioned it, and I have to give public condolences to all the Bowie High School family, all the Hill Highlander family of Mr. Jimmy Glasgow's loss. I know Jimmy really well. I coached with him youth football for a couple of years. Just a great man, a great senior teacher that taught English, I think 2 at Bowie High School, and taught not only the students but other teachers around him. And it was very impactful to see First Baptist Church completely full. So many of his students that he coached in his free time and volunteer in baseball and football, and then also so many Bowie High School students and Bowie High School teachers and staff that attended it. It was, unfortunately it happens in a district of 8,000 people, but it's never easy when it does. So please keep the Glasgow family in your prayers, as it was a pretty traumatic but a wonderful, uplifting funeral as a whole. With that, that is all the school board reports we have this evening. Next, we will go into the hearing examiner recommendation. I will give our reporter just a second. Is she set up? Perfect. Let me get set up. Just a second. I got it. This portion of the meeting of the Board of Trustees is convened on April 16th, 2015, to consider the recommendation for decision by an independent hearing examiner appointed by the Commissioner of Education in the matter styled Arlington Independent School District versus Ellis Spikes, TEA, docket number 021-LH-2015. The following board members are present: Peter Barron, Keisha Mays, Gloria Pena, Jamie Solons, Aaron Reich, and Bowie Hogg. I am Bowie Hogg. For the record, a quorum is present. The independent hearing examiner issued her recommendation for decision on April 13th, 2015. This meeting is being held within 20 days of the receipt by the board president of the hearing examiner's recommendation. Will the representative for the employee please state your name and whether you are a licensed attorney?
My name is Dennis Eichelbaum, and yes, I'm a licensed attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Eichelbaum. Is the attorney for Mr. Spikes present?
I received an email during this board meeting saying that they would not be present.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Eichelbaum. As the attorney for Mr. Spikes is not present, is the administration willing to waive its oral presentation?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you. The board has reviewed the record. Does any board member wish to go into closed meeting to deliberate, or is the preference for someone to make a motion at this time? Perfect. Do I have a motion regarding this case?
President Hogg, I move to adopt the independent hearing examiner's recommendation in TEA docket number 021-LH-2015 and to terminate Ellis Adonis Spikes' term contract immediately.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, as we have a motion by Ms. Solons and a second by Dr. Reich? Any discussion? Perfect. We have a motion and a second to adopt the independent hearing examiner's recommendation as the decision of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees. All those in favor, please vote now. 6 trustees present, 6 trustees voting in the affirmative. The hearing is concluded.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. At this time, at 9:30, we are adjourned.